After high school, you moved on to the pinnacle of your life, and that was your attendance at Duke University here in North Carolina. There you chanced upon a young man, a man of international espionage, a man who was known as the Disco King, and the man who ran the Pegram International Games. Who ran the Pegram Games.
There he is.
When I first met Jeanne, I told her I was a Vietnam veteran. There is no way. But she believed me for months. In fact, it wasn't until she graduated that she realized I wasn't a veteran from the Vietnam War. Jeanne, you are so gullible.
Would you please welcome your brother-in-law and former president of Pegram Dormitory, Jeanne Townsend. Jim, you know, a big part of university life at Duke was the Myrtle Beach experience during the summers. I wanted to know if you had any comments about Jeanne's attendance at Myrtle Beach and what you think that she got out of that academically.
Academically?
Well, I think Myrtle Beach was very important to Jeanne. I think academically, you know, she had always been on the social science side, studying history and political science and that type of thing, and she needed some oceanography, she needed some biology, she needed some anthropology, particularly of the human male species, and I think Myrtle Beach was a graduate level course where she was able to see the male species in its natural environment, reacting to the various types of beverages that are served in Myrtle Beach under clinical, experimental conditions only. She had many notebooks filled with notes and photographs, all which are classified, but I have them in my safe in the Pentagon.
Jim, this is not Jeanne's first surprise birthday party. Do you remember another one where she was kidnapped from the library?
I do remember that very well. I remember Jeanne's 19th birthday very well. In fact, I was very upset by that 19th birthday because being the studious Pegram president that I was in the East Campus Library, in the Oriental Room, studying away for all of my exams, writing my papers, trying to maintain a passing average, and of course I was disrupted by hoodlums and vandals coming up there, putting a bag over your head, and pulling you off to, could have been Guantanamo as far as I know. Of course, Guantanamo was not a penal colony at the time, but I decided that I would go ahead and fail the exam the next day to take part in the abduction. And I think I was the one that carried your feet out the door as we liberated you from the library.
I never knew who did it till now.
And Jim, I believe you helped her quite a bit with proving her papers. Talk about that experience.
You were a real hard ASS when you proofread my papers.
Well,
I must say.
Well, someone had to. Well, I was like, what's his name on the on that show? You know, the one that has the judge sing. What is that? Yeah, I had to be the Simon. Someone had to be the Simon. Obviously, your professors are giving you passing grades and A's. I had to go in there and say, Jeanne, this could be better.
This is a stupid idea.
Jeanne, this is a stupid idea. But I do have something to say, Dr. Dan, and I'm glad I have the microphone on the floor, which I will give up in just a moment. But it seems that every year I am accosted by your children who insist that I used to date you. And I thought what I'd better do is tell the story so that they understand that, in fact, I didn't date you. However, there was a time, an incident that happened when you were a freshman, and I was in FAC as a sophomore. And and I was in charge of you and your group. I had just told you I was a Vietnam veteran. That night, we were all drinking heavily. And
that was the first day of school.
It was indeed. And being a sophomore and you being a freshman, I decided that I would, come up and show you what upperclassmen could do and squire you around the campus. And just as I was getting up the courage to ask you out, Ned Patz arrived, said he had a six-pack and a car, and all of a sudden, you were gone. And I didn't have a chance to ask you to go out. It was a six-pack and a car.
Nick Kiprios.
It was Nick Kiprios. But the bottom line here is that I didn't have a six-pack, and I didn't have a car, and so obviously I was outclassed by Nick Kiprios. But I will say this, that about 3 years later, when my brother began to show interest in Jeanne, I took him aside and said, look, Tom, let me give you some advice with her. You got to have a car, and you got to have a six-pack. If you don't have those two, you're not going to get Jeanne.
One other question for you, Mike. During your term as Pegram president, there was a certain young man in the dormitory by the name of Stu. You remember Stu. And Stu owned, in North Carolina parlance, a vehicle that was of questionable repute. I'd first like to ask you if you have any knowledge of Jeanne ever being in his van.
Yes, I do. In fact, it happened that same night.